Fat wife abandoned for younger woman mountain. Man said, "You are the only woman I'll ever need." The stew still simmered when laughter, young, bright, and cruelly careless, spilled from the parlor. Cora Blackwood wiped her hands on her apron and stepped through the doorway to find her husband seated too close to a girl with diamond eyes and silk-smooth gloves. William rose as if summoned by propriety, not conscience. The girl, Victoria Sterling, 19, and gossiped about since her first day in Cedar Grove, only tilted her smile, amused. "Cora," William said, voice flat as ledger paper, "we need to talk." He did not bother to soften the blow. "I can't continue this marriage. You've changed. You're not the woman I married." Cora's fingers tightened around the dish towel until the threads bit her skin. 7 years, 3 children, nights of fever, mornings of bread dough and mended boots, and now a sentence passed like a clerk stamping rejected on a form. "We have a family," she managed, the words tasting of ash. "Emma is 6, Samuel is 4. Rosie still wakes crying for you." "That's the problem," he cut in, eyes flicking toward Victoria as if seeking applause. "Motherhood has made you unpresentable. Victoria understands what a man of standing requires." Victoria stood, glossy as a shop window, and offered pity sharpened to a point. "Mrs. Blackwood, society can be unforgiving. William needs a wife who fits." Little feet pattered. Emma and Sammy burst in, Rosie toddling behind. "Papa," Emma asked, seeing the packed valise by the door, "where are you going?" "Elsewhere," William said, not bending, not touching. "You'll stay with your mother. You'll learn to behave." Emma flung her arms around his leg. He shook her off. Victoria's mouth curled. "We won't be taking on attachments," she murmured. News moved through Cedar Grove faster than a prairie fire. By sundown, Mrs. Prudence Hartford was declaring in the general store that William deserved a prettier wife, and Mrs. Whitmore was nodding like a bobbing hen. Friends turned their faces away on the boardwalk. Church ladies traded prayer for gossip. Cora walked home carrying bread, milk, and a silence that weighed more than both. Saturday market came with necessity. She bundled the children and braved the stairs. And there he was, William in a new coat, Victoria bright at his side, both gleaming with the satisfaction of people who believe the town belongs to them. "Cora," Victoria sang, "you look tired. Single motherhood must be exhausting." Emma ran to her father. "Come home, Papa." He stepped back. "No." Cora's breath hitched. She would not plead. She lifted her chin, but humiliation burned hot as a brand. A voice cut clean through the murmur of the crowd. "I believe there's a mistake being made." Heads turned. A man as broad as a barn door and as steady as a granite outcrop moved through the crush. He wore a blacksmith's leather and the mountain's wind in his hair. Matthias Ironwood bare to the ranch hands, the kind of man whose word weighed more than a contract, stopped beside Cora and set himself between her and the cruelty. He looked at William the way a thunderhead looks at a dying candle. A man doesn't abandon his family and call it happiness. He turned to Cora then, and his voice gentled. "Mrs. Blackwood, I have watched you keep 3 little lives fed and a broken heart quiet. In my eyes, you are the most beautiful woman in this town." Silence fell, wide and astonished. Then, before Cedar Grove could catch its breath, Matthias Ironwood went to one knee on the dusty planks, palm open to her trembling hands. "If you'll let me," he said, steady as bedrock, I will stand between you and every storm from this day forward." The marketplace of Cedar Grove buzzed like a hive barter and gossip blending under the bright autumn sky. Yet at its heart, all eyes had fixed on one tableau: a weary mother, 3 wide-eyed children, and a man who had just bent his knee when no one expected. Cora's breath snagged in her chest. She felt the weight of whispers on her back, pity from some, scorn from others. She was a woman of 29, her figure softened by childbirth, her hands calloused from needle and thread. Her once bright auburn hair was pinned up hastily, stray wisps clinging to her damp cheeks. She knew what the town saw: a woman left behind, a woman no man of sense would choose. But Matthias Ironwood's eyes did not falter. He was a giant of a man, his shoulders broad from years at the forge, his palms scarred by both hammer and reins. He had lived on Pine Ridge for over a decade after sickness carried off his wife before their marriage bore fruit. Since then, he had worked his ranch alone, a recluse whispered about in town, too rich to need company, too fierce to be trifled with. And yet, here he was, kneeling in the dust for the woman the town had mocked. "Stand up, Matthias," William Blackwood scoffed, though his voice wavered. "This is ridiculous. Cora is my wife." Matthias rose slowly, towering over William like a tree over a weed. His voice, low and iron-cast, carried through the crowd. "You left her. You paraded a child in silks through town while your own went hungry. You forfeited your claim the day you walked out that door." Cora clutched her children close, cheeks burning with shame. Emma's small hand slid into hers. "Mama, please say yes," the girl whispered, eyes wide with hope. Mrs. Hartford hissed from the crowd, "Scandalous! A widow, maybe, but a discarded wife. Unseemly." But then a murmur rose, others speaking softer, kinder. "She deserves better." William never was the man he pretended to be. Ironwood's got honor in spades. Cora's throat tightened. Her pride warred with her fear. She had no illusions. Men said sweet words when they wanted something. But Matthias had nothing to gain, except her and her children, and everything to risk, by standing against the town's judgment. He turned to her now, dropping his voice so only she and the children could hear. "Cora, I don't offer charity. I offer a home, a place where your little ones will never beg for a father's love and where you will never weep alone again." Her tears spilled hot and fast. For years she had stitched and scraped, borne silence and scorn, prayed that her children would not see how hollow she had become. And here, before the market and before God himself, a man offered not pity, but reverence. Emma tugged her skirt. "Mama, he called you beautiful." The world seemed to tilt. Cora lifted her chin, meeting Matthias's steady gaze. In his eyes there was no mockery, no impatience, only the steady truth of a man who meant every word. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Would she dare to believe she was worthy of being chosen again? The decision was made not with grand speeches, but with a simple nod. Cora's chin trembled as she whispered, "Yes." And with that one word, the market's noise seemed to fall away. Matthias lifted Emma onto his broad shoulder, gathered Samuel with his other arm, and gestured for Cora to hold little Rose close. "Come," he said quietly, his voice a promise more than a command. "This town has had enough of your tears." They left Cedar Grove as whispers rippled in their wake. Some sneered, others shook their heads, but a few looked on with awe. For in that moment it was clear to all, A discarded wife had been claimed as a queen by the most formidable man in the county. The wagon creaked under its load as Matthias guided the horses northward. Autumn leaves swirled across the road, catching in Cora's skirts as the children huddled beside her. She had packed nothing. There had been no time, but Matthias's wagon was filled with sacks of flour, smoked meat, and thick wool blankets. He had come prepared, as though he had long known this day would arrive. For hours the road twisted through rolling hills and sparse woods. As the town faded, Cora felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. Still, doubt gnawed at her. "Why?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. "Why me, Matthias? You could have any woman." His hand stayed steady on the reins, but his gaze flickered toward her. "Because you're not any woman. I've watched you walk through fire for those children. I've seen you stitch until your fingers bled, go without so they could eat. And I've seen the way you still smile at them, even when your heart's breaking. That's strength, Cora. That's beauty." She looked away, ashamed of the tears rising to her eyes. "William said I let myself go, that I was no longer—" She swallowed the words. Matthias's voice hardened. "William's a fool. Any man who measures a wife by her waistline instead of her worth is no man at all." The children broke the heaviness with their laughter as Samuel spotted a deer bounding through the trees. "Papa Bear, look!" he cried, already using the name they had given Matthias. Matthias's stern face softened. "Quick eyes, lad. You'll make a fine hunter one day." He pulled a small carved horse from his pocket and handed it to Samuel. "Made this myself. For you." Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Do you have one for me?" "Of course." He reached into his satchel and produced a little wooden doll with a painted smile. "Every queen needs a princess at her side." Emma giggled, clutching the doll to her chest. Cora watched, her heart aching at the tenderness in his gestures. Already her children looked at him with a trust they had never shown William. By the time the sun dipped low, the road narrowed and began to climb. The air grew crisp, scented with pine and wood smoke. Shadows stretched long across the path, but Matthias guided the horses with certainty. At a bend, they stopped to rest by a river. Matthias built a fire with practiced ease, the sparks catching against the darkening sky. He handed Cora a steaming tin cup of broth from a pot he carried. "You eat first," he said firmly. She hesitated. "But the children, they're already fed." He nodded toward the little ones, who sat happily gnawing on thick slices of bread and cheese. "Now it's your turn." The warmth of the broth spread through her like something more than food. It was care, freely given, something she had not felt in years. As the children drifted to sleep beneath the heavy wool blankets, Matthias sat beside Cora, the firelight dancing across his rugged features. "You're safe now," he said simply. Cora's throat tightened. "Safe," she repeated, as though the word were foreign. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe it. Above them, the stars spread wide across the sky. Ahead, the mountains loomed dark, vast, and waiting. But Cora did not feel fear. For the first time since William left, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The wagon rattled to a halt just as dawn's first light brushed the ridges in gold. Cora, half asleep with Rose in her arms, stirred at the sound of Matthias's voice. "We're home." Before them, nestled in the cradle of Pine Ridge, stood a sprawling log house built of massive timber. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and wide porches wrapped around the home like welcoming arms. Beyond, fields stretched toward the tree line, with barns and corrals hinting at cattle and horses. To Cora's weary eyes, it looked less like a ranch and more like a fortress carved out of wilderness. Emma gasped, clutching her little wooden doll. "Mama, it's like a castle!" Samuel leaned forward, eyes round. "Papa Bear, do we get to stay here?" Matthias chuckled softly. "Not just stay. This is your home now." Cora's breath caught. Home. She hadn't dared to use that word for months without it stinging. Now it wrapped around her like a balm. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth. A great stone fireplace dominated the main room, its mantel lined with hand-carved figurines. Heavy rugs softened the wooden floor, and polished tables bore the marks of Matthias's craftsmanship. He led the children down a hall where 3 small bedrooms waited, each already prepared. Emma's room had shelves stacked with storybooks and a patchwork quilt stitched in soft pinks. Samuel's held a carved toy chest shaped like a wagon, and little Rose's crib was draped with lace curtains. "You did this?" Cora whispered. Matthias shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. "I wasn't sure what they'd like. I just tried to guess." Cora touched the quilt, her vision blurring. No one, not even William, had ever prepared something so thoughtful for her children. "And this," Matthias said, pushing open a wider door, "is for you." Cora stepped inside and nearly staggered. The master bedroom was spacious, the bed carved of oak and piled high with feather pillows. White curtains framed the window, through which morning light spilled across a writing desk, a wardrobe, and a rocking chair placed beside the hearth. A vase of late-blooming wildflowers sat on the dresser as though waiting for her. Her lips parted, but no words came. "It's yours," Matthias said softly. "All of it, if you'll have it." That first week, life settled into rhythm. At dawn, Matthias rose to tend the cattle. Soon the children trailed after him, their laughter echoing through the valley as he lifted Samuel onto a horse or taught Emma how to scatter feed for the hens. Even little Rose toddled beside him, clutching his enormous finger in her tiny hand. Cora, meanwhile, found herself rediscovering skills she thought forgotten. She baked bread in the stone oven, humming softly as she worked. She mended clothes, but now with better fabric and better light. When she swept the wide porch, it was not with bitterness, but with quiet pride. She was not cleaning a stranger's house, but her own. Every evening, when the sun dipped behind the ridge, Matthias gathered them around the hearth. He carved toys by firelight, telling stories of the mountains, while Cora rocked Rose to sleep. And when the children were tucked in, silence stretched between them, never heavy, but full of unsaid things. There were moments that caught her breath. The first time Matthias handed her a steaming bowl of stew, he waited until she took the first bite before serving himself. The morning he found her struggling with a bundle of firewood, he wordlessly took it from her arms and split it in seconds with one swing of his axe. "You shouldn't carry more than you must," he said simply. The evening a storm rolled in, rattling the windows. He brought an extra quilt to her room. "You'll sleep warmer this way." His hand lingered on the blanket for a heartbeat too long, his eyes unreadable in the firelight. These were not grand gestures, but to Cora they were louder than declarations of love. They were proof. One night, after the children had fallen asleep, Cora found Matthias sitting alone on the porch, sharpening his knife beneath the moonlight. His face was a sculpture of shadows, strong and solemn. She hesitated, then stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You've given us more than I could ever repay," she said quietly. He set the blade aside, meeting her gaze with startling intensity. "Don't speak of repayment. What you and the children have brought into this house." His voice trailed off, thick with emotion. "I thought I'd live out my years in silence. Now every corner sings with life. It's me who owes you." Her throat tightened. "You make it sound so easy, but sometimes I still feel like the woman who wasn't enough, too plain, too tired, too—" Matthias stood abruptly, towering over her. "Don't!" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Then, softer, "You are more than enough, Cora. You're everything." The words lodged deep in her chest, where doubt had lived too long. For the first time, she let herself believe them. As autumn deepened, so did their bond. Trust grew in small acts, affection blossomed in unspoken moments. The children began calling him Papa without hesitation, their laughter twining with his baritone hum as he worked in the forge. And Cora, once discarded, once humiliated, felt something stir inside her she thought long dead. Hope, yes, but also love, raw and startling. The cabin on Pine Ridge, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary, a new beginning. But shadows never stayed far. And as word of Cora's new life spread beyond the ridge, whispers of jealousy and bitterness began to coil through Cedar Grove, echoes of a man who had once called her wife and was not done with her yet. The peace of Pine Ridge seemed unshakable at first. Days were filled with children's laughter, the steady rhythm of chores, and the comforting crackle of the hearth at night. But shadows have a way of finding cracks in even the strongest walls. It began with whispers. When Cora rode into Cedar Grove to sell quilts and butter, she felt the eyes of the townsfolk linger longer than before. Women who once turned their backs now offered sly smiles. Men tipped their hats, murmuring things just loud enough to sting. She didn't waste any time, did she? Trading one husband for another, this one rich. No wonder she snagged him. He's been lonely too long. Cora held her chin high, but the words clung like burrs. Back at Pine Ridge, Matthias noticed the cloud in her eyes. One evening, as they shelled beans by the fire, he asked quietly, "What did they say this time?" "Nothing worth repeating," she replied, though her trembling hands betrayed her. He reached across the table, covering her fingers with his broad palm. "Let them talk. They've never known the truth of you. I have, and I'll stand against anyone who dares say otherwise." Her chest ached at the certainty in his voice. Still, she feared the whispers would find their way to her children's ears. Then came the letter. One cold morning, a writer delivered a sealed envelope stamped with William Blackwood's name. Matthias broke the wax without hesitation, scanning the contents, his jaw tightening. Cora's heart thudded. "What does it say?" Matthias's voice was clipped. "He claims you are still his lawful wife, that you've been led astray by a mountain brute." His knuckles whitened around the paper. "He intends to seek custody of the children." Cora felt the room tilt. "He abandoned us. He married Victoria. How could he?" Matthias leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Because men like him cannot stand to lose face or fortune. He sees you happy, and it burns him." She closed her eyes, recalling the coldness in William's gaze, the way he had pushed Emma aside in the marketplace. And yet now he wanted to claim them if not for love, then for pride and money. As if the letter weren't enough, trouble stirred within Cedar Grove. Sheriff Abram Huxley, a man known for turning favor into coin, paid a visit to Pine Ridge. He leaned against the porch rail with an oily smile. "Afternoon, Ironwood. Fine place you've got here. Shame if someone were to question the legality of your arrangement." Matthias crossed his arms, towering over him. "Spit it out, Sheriff." Huxley's smile widened. "Word is, William's preparing a case. Claims this lady here belongs to him, along with the young'uns. Could be mighty inconvenient for you unless a contribution were made to keep things friendly in court." Cora flushed with anger, but Matthias's voice was ice. "Get off my land. I'll not pay a vulture to circle overhead." The sheriff's eyes glinted with malice. "Suit yourself. But mark my words, Ironwood men like Blackwood have friends, and friends can turn the law against you." That night, when the children were asleep, Cora sat by the fire with Matthias, her hands wringing her apron. "Maybe he's right," she whispered. "Maybe the law won't see me as free." Matthias crouched before her, lifting her chin until she met his steady gaze. "Cora, listen to me. The law is ink on paper, but I will stand with you in flesh and blood. If William wants to take you back, he'll have to go through me, and he won't win." Her tears spilled silently. "I don't want the children dragged into this." "They won't be," Matthias vowed. "This is my fight as much as yours now, and I don't lose fights." But deep down, Cora knew it was not just fists and guns that would decide their fate. It was reputation, money, and whispers in the ears of powerful men. And William had already begun spinning his web. The mountains offered peace, but the storm below was gathering, and sooner or later it would climb Pine Ridge. Snow clung heavy to the pines the morning William came. Cora had just stoked the hearth when the sound of hooves shattered the quiet. From the porch she saw them, William astride a fine bay, Victoria perched smugly at his side, and behind them Sheriff Huxley with 2 deputies. Their presence cast a shadow longer than the winter morning. Matthias stepped out of the barn, axe in hand, his breath pluming in the cold air. He set the blade against the woodpile, wiped his palms, and strode to the porch with the steady gait of a man unafraid. "Mornin', Ironwood," Sheriff Huxley called, feigning courtesy. "We've come on official business." "You've come to trespass," Matthias replied, his voice low and iron hard. William dismounted, his fine coat dusted with frost. His eyes slid over Cora with disdain, though a flicker of unease betrayed him when he saw her children peering from behind the door. "I'm here for what's mine," William declared. "Cora is still my wife. Those children are still my blood, and I'll not have them living in sin with some brute from the hills." Cora stepped forward before Matthias could answer. Her voice shook, but her words rang clear. "You forfeited us the day you walked out, William. You married another woman while your children wept for you. Don't you dare speak of rights you abandoned." Victoria's laugh was sharp as glass. "You think anyone will believe you, fat sow? The law favors William. And when this is over, you'll be nothing more than a harlot shamed before the county." Matthias's chest rose with restrained fury. He planted himself between Cora and William, his height casting both William and the sheriff into shadow. "Enough. You'll not speak another word against her." Sheriff Huxley cleared his throat. "Now, Ironwood, no need for threats. Mr. Blackwood's petition will be heard in court. Until then, It's only right Mrs. Blackwood return with him. Matthias's eyes blazed. She's not leaving this house. Not today. Not ever. The sheriff's deputies shifted uneasily, their hands hovering near their pistols. The air cracked with tension. Then a small voice broke the silence. Emma, brave beyond her years, stepped out onto the porch clutching her wooden doll. Her chin lifted as she looked at her father. "We don't want you, Papa. We want Papa Bear. He loves us." Samuel clung to her side, nodding fiercely. Even baby Rose toddled forward, reaching stubby arms toward Matthias. The sight gutted William more than any bullet could. His face twisted, pride warring with shame. Matthias bent, scooping Rose into his arms. His other hand rested on Emma's shoulder. "You heard them," he said, voice steady as the mountain. "This family is mine to protect. You'll not take them." For a long, taut moment, it seemed blood might stain the snow. William's fingers twitched at his belt, Sheriff Huxley's jaw clenched, and the deputies shifted their weight. But it was Victoria who broke first, her shrill voice cutting the air. "William, they're not worth it. Let them rot on this mountain." William's shoulders slumped beneath the weight of her scorn. Without another word, he mounted his horse. The sheriff, muttering curses, followed. Their retreat was bitter, but retreat it was. As the sound of hooves faded, Cora sagged against the porch rail, tears spilling hot against her chilled cheeks. Matthias turned to her, his arms encircling her and the children all at once. "You're safe here," he murmured, his lips near her ear. "No law, no man, no storm will take you from me." And for the first time since her world had shattered, Cora believed him. That night, warmth pulsed through the cabin, though winter wind howled outside. The great stone hearth glowed, throwing golden light across the timber walls. A pot of stew simmered slowly, filling the room with the rich scent of thyme and venison. Cora sat near the fire, her sewing laid aside. Emma and Samuel played a quiet game of checkers at the low table, while baby Rose dozed against Matthias's broad chest. He rocked her gently, humming an old hymn that rumbled like the earth itself. The house felt different, now safer, stronger, as though the confrontation on the snowy porch had sealed it with something unbreakable. Cora lifted her gaze to Matthias, watching the way his rough hands cradled the sleeping child as though she were made of glass. "You've given us more than protection," she whispered. "You've given us a home." Matthias's eyes softened, catching the firelight. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing her knuckles. "It's your home now if you'll have it." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Cora's heart swell. Her throat tightened as she nodded, unable to speak past the tears. She pressed his hand to her cheek, and for the first time in years she felt not cast aside, but cherished. Emma glanced up from the checkerboard, her voice clear and sure. "Mama, Papa Bear is ours now, isn't he?" Cora smiled through her tears. "Yes, darling, he's ours." The wind rattled the shutters, yet inside the cabin there was only warmth. The glow of fire, the murmur of children, the steady strength of the man beside her. But beyond the ridge, the world still waited, filled with gossip, with courts, with men like William who would never forget their pride. Cora rested her head against Matthias's shoulder, wondering in the quiet of her heart, would their love be strong enough to stand against everything beyond these mountains? Every time I share a story like this, I am reminded how love can bloom in the harshest places, and how courage often begins in the hearts of those who've been hurt the most. Perhaps you, too, have felt cast aside or unseen. But remember, there is always someone out there who will see your worth clearly, just as Matthias saw Cora's. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? I love knowing how these stories travel across the world, connecting us. And if you still believe in true love, don't go anywhere. The next tale is waiting for you.